The number of times NVIDIA has risen from the ashes with something innovative.
Who got the truth?
These improvements that they're making are literally unfathomable to the human mind. Jensen Huang has bet the company 3 separate times and won.
If you don't build it, they can't come. You really want to invest in whoever is selling the picks and the shovels.
Jensen's trying to tell us all that this is the future.
He's not keeping this a secret. Unbelievable.
Totally crazy.
Okay, generative AI.
We're watching this freaking magic happen.
This is just the beginning. There's robotics, there's the Omniverse, there's autonomous vehicles. It's all coming.
All the stuff they're involved in is so inarguably good for humanity. It's like a literally unbelievable story, except that it happened, so you have to believe it.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now?
We're coming to you live from the SAP Center in San Jose, California. Over the last few days, this place has been completely transformed from a hockey arena to now the center of the AI universe. Teams have been working around the clock to get everything ready for the GTC keynote, where in just a couple hours, Jensen Huang will take center stage.
San Jose has been painted green to get ready for the thousands of folks who made the trek for this year's GTC, an event that has become really the center of the universe for what's next in AI and computing. But before we look ahead, we are taking a step back.
Yep, this pregame show is an outside-in look at the history of NVIDIA, how it started, the big bets, the turning points, and the people who made it all happen. We'll walk through the moments that shaped the company and led to where we are today.
Welcome to Live at NVIDIA GTC With Acquired. I'm Ben Gilbert.
And I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. So David, what are we doing here today?
Well, we are here for the Super Bowl of AI, the Super Bowl of technology, NVIDIA GTC. And the reason that we are here actually starts with the actual Super Bowl.
Yep.
A couple of weeks ago. Jensen was watching the Super Bowl and got an idea and gave us a call. And he said, the great thing about the Super Bowl, it's this incredible game, the whole country tunes in, but they have all this production around it. They have the pregame show, and the pregame show is great because it allows the outside perspective to come in. You get other players, other coaches, analysts,
past
players, everybody not involved with the game on the field to come give the perspective of how did the teams end up here. And so he said, look, GTC is going to be the Super Bowl of tech. We need a pregame show.
Yep.
So he asked us to do it.
Yes. And this, for anyone out there who's an Acquired listener, this is not what we normally do. Normally, what David and I do is in our home studios, we spend a whole month preparing, 100 hours of research. We get in there on recording day on a given company, and we spend 8 hours recording. We trim it down to a 4 or 5 hour, heavily produced, heavily edited episode. And, we have a lot of time with it. We have a lot of futzing, and it's just you and me. There's no guests. It's certainly not live. It's the opposite of that. So this is different in literally every way.
Yes.
I think we've got 11 guests that we're bringing out to analyze NVIDIA with us today before Jensen's keynote.
Yeah. And so when we got the call from Jensen, we were like, okay, but we got to figure out a way to do this because not only do we love Jensen and NVIDIA, I feel like NVIDIA is kind of part of our story here at Acquired
For sure.
too. We did, 3 full Acquired episodes, just you and me, telling the history of NVIDIA, the 3 chapters of the company's rise from the graphics card era to the accelerated computing era, and now obviously the AI era that we're in today.
Yep.
Culminated in an interview with Jensen, and that was really a big part of kind of our breakout year and Acquired taking off. We feel like, in some small sense, we kind of grown up together with NVIDIA.
Well, we've grown up together. We're the very little brother.
The very little brother, yeah. And Jensen was kind enough to come to our arena show at Chase Center last year, so we thought
the least we could do
is come to their arena show too.
And NVIDIA is a very special company, and Jensen is a very special leader. I mean, if you look at the biggest companies in the world today, probably with the exception of Meta, none of them are run by founders. NVIDIA is a 30-year-old company still run by its founder. Jensen.
$3 trillion in market cap. And
as one of the biggest companies in the world, the way that they organize is different, the way they have meetings is different, the way that they release products is different. Everything about this company is different and very intriguing to David and I as company historians.
Yep.
So
what are we doing here today?
Well, we are going to go through NVIDIA's 3 different epochs throughout their history. We're starting with gaming, because remember, of course, they started making graphics cards for PC gamers. We're going to go through the accelerated computing era, and then, of course, we're going to go all the way to today in this modern AI era that we are living in. We've got an amazing guest lineup. We've got Pat Gelsinger joining us, who, of course, was the longtime Intel executive, former CEO until just a few months ago. We've got Michael Dell, who is the founder, of course, of Dell. We've got past and present CEOs of TSMC, Foxconn, Cadence, ServiceNow. It really is an incredible group of people to help us understand NVIDIA from the outside in.
Yeah, totally curated by Jensen himself. These are some of the most important partners, analysts, friends of NVIDIA throughout the years. We can't wait to dive in with them. But before we bring out our first guests, let's take a look back at how all of this all started.
Try not to embarrass yourself.
You probably need to speak a little louder. There's kind of a lot of noise back there.
Well, that's why we have these.
Well,
All right. Well, NVIDIA had a very clear goal in the early days, which was make 3D graphics possible as a form of artistic storytelling and enable game developers and artists everywhere to do just that. But in the early days, even just surviving was a challenge.
they had a sea of competitors. Jensen describes this as 80 companies all doing the same thing, and they almost went bankrupt multiple times. But somehow, NVIDIA persevered and went on to dominate the graphics card era.
Yep. So joining us to take us inside that moment are John Peddie, longtime industry analyst and expert on the graphic wars, CJ Muse, veteran investor who tracked NVIDIA's rise on Wall Street,
and Rick Tsai, the former CEO of TSMC and current CEO of MediaTek. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank
Good morning.
you.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. So, John, we thought we would start with a question for you, and we have something special here today. This is an NV1
Yeah.
signed by Jensen Huang himself.
Collector's item.
Yeah, this is NVIDIA's very first graphics card that they produced commercially. Tell us a little bit about what we are looking at here.
Well, you're looking at a genuine piece of history. This was a breakthrough concept. It was the foundation of NVIDIA. The whole idea of NVIDIA was based on doing quadrils instead of the conventional way that we had done it for the last, by that time, 20, 25 years.
Which was triangles and polygons, right?
Yeah, and the way we're doing it today. But they had an idea that there could be a different way of doing it, that it would be more efficient and more accurate and potentially, therefore, faster. And so that was their value add.
And so this graphics card actually did use quadrilaterals as the
Yes.
system to create graphics on screen.
And it did things. I had the pleasure of being at NVIDIA the day they got Sega games to run on this.
That's right.
And I remember Jensen saying to me, to his team, will you guys temper your enthusiasm? Because they were screaming and jumping around.
Don't
They
act
were
so surprised.
Well, yeah. Don't act so surprised.
Was that the Dreamcast?
Yeah,
the Sega Dreamcast.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and they had the arcade machines up and everything. But the problem was the software developers, they just couldn't get it. You know, we do triangles. We don't do these roundy things that you're talking about, whatever they are. That involves trigonometry and cosines. We don't like that.
So they were sort of too clever for their own good.
No, they were lazy.
No, I mean NVIDIA was trying to be too clever for their own good.
Well, I guess you could say that, yeah. They were trying to lead the industry into a new domain, but the industry was reluctant to change, as all industries are. And so, boom, the bottom fell out, and NVIDIA thought, it's over.
And this was the whole business plan, Jensen's business plan that Sequoia and Sutter Hill funded was quadrilaterals. This is going to revolutionize the industry.
There were a lot of disappointed people and some finger pointing, as you can imagine.
Well, Rick, we want to bring TSMC into the story. So by the time NVIDIA came to TSMC as a customer, they were already sort of a long way from figuring out, okay, customers are not using quadrilaterals. What do you remember from the first time that you sort of came across NVIDIA at TSMC as a potential fabless customer?
I think it's about 1997. Jensen came to TSMC and talked to Morris. And Morris, NVIDIA was small at the time, very small. But TSMC decided that he's a great customer. He can be a great customer, and we're all in.
It was a big bet that
it's a big
you
bet.
and Morris made on.
Jensen is very demanding, even when he was small company. Very demanding, and but we really jumped in for him. We make wafers anyway that he wanted us to make. I got a lot of phone calls from him when we're behind the shipment. Or sometimes we got a phone call from him and say, stop all wafer movement. Business is not good.
Oh, wow. Like, it's not selling as good as we thought, so please stop producing more.
Well, you guys know, it's a very volatile time in the late 90s.
Yeah.
But it was a fun time.
Maybe I'm curious about that philosophically. Why does the semiconductor industry have such a boom and bust nature to it?
Well, it goes on because the nature of the capital, very heavy capital investment to enable the semiconductor industry, and the need to follow the Moore's law, to make Moore's law happen. So you have to invest both in capital investment for the fabs, but you also have to have very heavy investment for the technology development. So people are very careful. When you invest too much, usually what happens is you invest too much, and the business demand is not so good. The whole industry just crash.
Speaking of capital investment, a couple years later, CJ, NVIDIA goes public in January 1999, before the bubble burst, at a then astronomical market capitalization of $626 million. What was Wall Street's sentiment on either NVIDIA specifically, or if they weren't even big enough to register, the graphics card industry writ large at the time?
I mean, by all metrics, a great success. The stock was up 125% in the first year. And as a side note, had you invested then $1,000, it would be worth $5 million today. So short-term, long-term, it worked out well. But, I would say this was right before the internet bubble burst. And so, things obviously turned sour soon thereafter. At the time, I would say focus for semiconductors was really more boom and bust. So investors playing the cycle, talking about the cyclicality and kind of the greed and fear. And so, it was a good 1 or 2 years, but soon thereafter,
So NVIDIA was just a small part of the semiconductor industry at that point in time, right? Yeah, it wasn't like, it wasn't this.
No. It was much more of an Intel-centric world at the time.
And you mentioned the dot-com burst. Why? I understand technology as a sector being sort of hit from the internet bubble bursting and a graphics card company being affected by that. But what about maybe making the link between those things? Is there anything intrinsic about the fact that less people are using the internet or investor sentiment has dried up around the internet that should affect a graphics card company? What I'm really driving at is, was NVIDIA collateral damage from the dot-com bubble bursting? It's
collateral damage in the sense that semiconductors, have almost a perfect one correlation with GDP. So the internet bust, dampen GDP, and obviously that would impact, everyone in the semiconductor supply chain.
Makes sense.
Well, Rick, well, really for all of you, you were talking about when you first met Jensen and he was making demands of TSMC as this very small customer that was lucky to have TSMC as a partner. I'm curious, maybe for each of you, we can go through, maybe start with John. What was Jensen like back then? I mean, this was not leather jacket, keynote, stadium filling Jensen Huang that we know today. Couldn't afford a leather jacket. What do you remember about him from that time?
Well, what I remember is he was, I know this is going to sound toady, I can't help it.
Order Denny's?
Get out of here.
God.
Surprise guest. Wow.
So, Rick, I came to the United States. Oh, do I need one of those? I came to the United States when I was quite young, and I didn't really know what American food was.
Yeah, I got you.
And then one day I got a job at Denny's when I was 15 years old, and there's all of American food, all you can eat. And it was the best job in the world because they gave you 2 free meals a day. Unbelievable, right? And you could eat anything you want except for the New York steak. All right? And my favorite, excuse me, thank you. Appreciate that. My favorite was sausages and pancake, and you just roll it up like a corn dog. Do you know what I'm talking about? And you dip it with some syrup. Back in the old days, we used to call it pigs in a blanket.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
What do we call it now?
Apparently, these are called NVIDIA bites.
Like officially?
Yeah.
Wow. Is that an announcement here at GTC?
Yeah,
They're renaming the menu?
This is Denny's has a brand new product. It's called NVIDIA Bites. And
Oh my God.
Who has the copyright on that?
Yeah.
Who has that copyright?
all right, so here we go. My hands are full.
All right. Wow.
So are we going to eat them here
Yeah.
on air? Is that
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, come on.
Jensen, thank you.
Thank you, Jensen.
Somebody got to start.
Here.
So I'm curious how this. Don't you have a
Well,
keynote?
here-
Yeah.
Here we go.
Jensen, I feel like your
Rick, have
time
you
might
ever-
be best
have
to
you
use
ever
elsewhere.
Have you ever had pigs in a blanket?
No,
Take one and pass it.
I
Okay.
take one for my lunch. How's that?
Oh boy.
No, just
But David, here's the answer to your question. This is how Jensen behaved, looked like 30 years ago. It's just him.
Jensen, we were just
just a
asking
bit
the
more
panel
white hair.
how they remember you 30
He was
years ago.
totally black.
You better explain that.
30 years
I don't
ago?
know how to do this one.
Guys, I need
Here, I got it.
Yeah, I got it.
That's how we're paid for
Okay,
this.
don't here, Rick. I got one for you. I'm going to make this
Okay.
one for you.
For the viewers at home, you can see this is clearly very planned, the way that we're eating off of our plastic.
Yeah,
You dip it in.
dip in there.
This is that good. This is like the opposite of corn dogs dipped in mustard, right? It's basically the same thing, except you dip it in syrup. How
breakfast
delicious
version.
is that?
It's pretty good.
It's good, right?
Wait, Jensen,
Now
can
we're all sticky. That's fantastic.
I like them.
we got to ask you the question that we've been asking them. Do you think you've evolved over the years? Like, how has your view of yourself changed since you went from?
I gotta say, here, Ben, give me that. I gotta give you some sauce, man.
Oh, thank you.
You can't eat that without sauce.
He's not hearing you.
You know I would say I'm not as smart as I used to be, but that,
Thank you.
and the reason for that is because when we were younger, we could learn faster, and you can concentrate for a lot longer, and so the thing, the Jensen I remember is able to intensely focus on something.
Like begging TSMC for some capacity in the early days.
Oh, that I could still do. that I could still do because I've got good practice. Yeah, I'm constantly doing it. Well, asking for help is something that comes very naturally for me because I need a lot of it. But the younger version of me was just it's more intense, and you could learn things faster. You could stay focused for a lot longer. I could work all night But now you have to take more naps, and you lose concentration a little easier, And so I don't know what it is, but maybe we're wiser now than before. But I still really enjoy the intensity of the younger version. What do you guys think? Peddie, what do you think?
I think that as you get older, you get wiser and you realize everything's not an emergency.
Well, nobody knows about getting old better than you do.
I've been waiting for that.
Wait, while we have Jensen here, Jensen gave me an anecdote that at one point you used to publish a list of all the graphics cards companies that were out there on the market.
Yeah, I still do.
And at one point, NVIDIA went missing from that list. Was that a mistake, or did you think they went out of business?
No, I wrote them off.
Really?
This is not joke. It's true. So at the end of the John Peddie report, what he wrote was how I learned about the market. And back then there was, internet wasn't there, so that was our entire market research. And so at the end of that report, he would publish all of the companies. And when we first started, there weren't that many companies. It was like S3 and Western. And then after we started, there was like 30 more, 50 more. Okay, and so every single week I would go, oh my God, who else joined? And everybody's a competitor. Everybody's trying to, be the 3D graphics company. And so one day, so we were one of the first to really focus on consumer 3D. And then one day, it was about during the time of MV2 and MV3 when we were practically going out of business. But I didn't declare it so. CJ, it wasn't like I woke up and go, oh, I don't expect to see my name in that report anymore because we're about to go out of business. You don't.
That should happen after.
That should happen after. Exactly. And so John predicted our demise, and he anticipated our demise. And so he goes, I'm going to make sure this document is going to be accurate for historically,
Yeah.
So is
And
all
so he
this
just wrote us
success out of spite to John's report?
all of our success is just accidental. I just want to put it that way.
I think rumors of NVIDIA's demise were greatly exaggerated.
Yes.
Speaking of, though,
Yeah.
you got a keynote that you got to go
Yeah, we're
prepare
getting
for.
the high sign here.
I do. Have you guys seen the lines? I hope. Did somebody prepare a speech?
I think
We
that's on
should
you.
start
Guys,
thinking
make
about
sure
that.
that they have wet.
Get this man a napkin.
Guys,
Get this-
Thank you for doing this. It's so incredible.
Good luck
Thanks,
today. Thanks,
Jensen.
Jensen.
Have fun, guys.
Well, that was unexpected.
That was fun.
Maybe on that exact topic.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, you got to.
That answers the question you asked.
Yeah,
What's Jensen like? That's what he's like.
that's what he's like.
Why, other than sheer force of will and all that, and Jensen is magic, why didn't they go out of business? Why were they the one of 2 or 3 remaining graphics cards companies coming out of that era?
He's not a quitter. He just won't lie down and die. And NVIDIA would have survived as long as he breathes. Even if it just came down to him, it would still be NVIDIA. And he'd be doing it until someone took his toys away.
There's a great quote that he used to say from back in that era of "My will to survive exceeds everyone else's will to kill me." And clearly it's still true.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's flash forward to today a little bit to talk about, the dramatic change in the company. So, Rick, MediaTek works with NVIDIA today as a close partner. How would you describe that relationship, the product that MediaTek makes, and how you work with NVIDIA?
I thought it's a great partnership. It complements each other. NVIDIA does many things extremely well, but we don't have many overlaps. And we have good technology, they have great technology. So it's natural that we're working in 2, maybe 3 fronts together. But the most important thing, I think, is then the trust that Jensen and I have built over almost 30 years. That really makes things happen because it's a very complicated partnership. We pour in a lot of resources. They do too, and we'll have to. And Jensen comes up with a new idea of digits, right in the middle of the project. Brilliant. It's Jensen. You ask why he can survive. Brilliant, tenacious. He doesn't take no for an answer. Bam, bam, bam. So I always told my friends, if I have confidence in anybody who can come back up from a dip, it's Jensen.
And how do you think about that from a partner perspective? How do you get very clear on where your responsibility ends and where NVIDIA's responsibility starts? Because a lot of the time, the things that happens in those partnerships over the year is somebody expands and they sort of eat their partner's lunch.
It's we kind of had a handshake agreement after a dinner. And who owns this part of the business? Who owns this part of the business? Which makes sense. And the long time I have been working with Jensen, there's a phrase called rough justice. That you win sometime, I win sometime, but over 5 years, roughly, we're about equal, 50-50, or 48, 52.
You're not
49.
Venmoing back and forth.
Yeah, we don't look at one snapshot at a time. If you do, well, it will be very difficult. Everybody just trying to say, what's in for me today? That doesn't work with Jensen either. And I think that's how also TSMC has been so successful with NVIDIA. You look at the history of the two companies, there's no better partnership. Yeah. You look at both companies.
Well, CJ, I'm told that you have a piece of paper folded up in your pocket. We asked CJ to prepare a list of NVIDIA stock price events over the years and a little bit of narrative with each one. So take us through NVIDIA stock through the history.
So I think that the key here is that Jensen kind of bet on a market that didn't exist, right? And so there was natural skepticism over time.
In gaming or in
in deep learning AI. Okay. And so very interestingly, you had AlexNet released in 2012. NVIDIA stock was 33 cents, right? You had AlphaGo in 2016, $2. You had...
And these are split adjusted from the price
split
today.
Adjusted, yeah. And you had the famous Google Transformer paper in 2017, $5. You had the ChatGPT moment in November 2022, $16. And then the Big Bang when they crushed guidance by $4 billion, $40. You could have bought that day and you would have tripled your money. Right, so the market just was very slow to appreciate, I think, kind of the magnitude of the size of the market that was going to develop. And so I would say today, $3 trillion plus market cap, the skepticism is a lot less.
What is the narrative from a Wall Street standpoint at those moments in time? I mean, it seems quaint, $2 a share, $5 a share when the Transformer paper is published, but at the time, it was a sky-high valuation. I mean, there were real questions about, like, gosh, could this company ever grow into this valuation? Like, how did Wall Street process this?
It was a challenge. I upgraded in 2016. Pre-split, the stock had run from 20 to 70. And after I upgraded it to a buy, I had, hundreds of people tell me, like, you're way too late, it's over. And split adjusted, that was $2, right? So, it ran up so far so fast, and the average investor had kind of positioned them as kind of just more of a consumer-focused company, and we didn't truly understand how important they were in terms of building both hardware, software, and creating a platform, right, where they would just have such a significant moat. And so it took time for investors to believe. But had you listened to Jensen, as he thinks in 5 and 10 year kind of increments, he told you where the puck was going. You just had to believe him. And I would say many investors that I work with did, but also many did not.
And I think the lesson isn't just always believe CEOs when they tell you that. It's that Jensen happened to be someone that you could believe. Because there's a lot of people out there preaching crazy visions. His just was right.
Again, he was creating brand new markets, right? So you had to underwrite the fact that he was going to get a percentage of global, worldwide IT spending, and that he would actually then grow the pie through deep learning, AI, et cetera.
I'm curious, as we wrap our time here together covering this first era of NVIDIA and sort of foreshadowing into the next era of accelerated computing, the key for that transition really was this concept of general purpose computing on GPUs, and that you could program NVIDIA hardware to do general purpose computing. For each of you, maybe quickly, when did you first realize that this was going to be more than a graphics card company? Maybe John, we'll start with you.
Probably around 2018, NVIDIA launched a thing called Grid.
Yep.
And Grid was a compute accelerator box, basically, that could live in the server or could live on campus, wherever you wanted it to. But it would be an asset. It would be a resource, and you could just throw problems at it, and answers would come out. So it was, a utility box. And that was probably the moment that NVIDIA signaled the world, we're in the compute business. And they spent the next 5 years trying to explain to people, we're not a chip company, we're a platform company. It took 5 years before people started to go, huh? They couldn't get the message properly consumed. And so that slowed down a little bit of their stock price, even though they were doing the work.
CJ, do you remember a moment for you where you realized this could be a general purpose compute company?
It was 2016, and I had been thinking that they were going to progress. If you spent any time with Jensen, he would tell you that 100% of workloads would use accelerated computing, and naturally that would be his world, not Intel's world. And I think it was really hard to see that kind of potential disruption, but I firmly believe that we could get at least 5 or 10 or 15%. And that's such a large enough market that they could grow their data center revenues into it. Did I at the time then foresee what we're seeing now? Definitely not.
Only Jensen did.
Yes.
Rick, same question to you.
Earlier, about 2007, 2008 time.
You were at the place to see it.
Yeah, well, no. Jensen told me. No. He talked to me. He said, "Hey, Rick, we're going into national labs, National Weather Bureau, so that they can run the supercomputer job using his graphics units." I said, I don't understand. Then he talked about the CUDA. That's how early he invested in CUDA. I don't understand a damn thing. I gotta be honest.
You and the rest of the world at that time.
Yeah. But I got it because the GPU architecture is a massive parallel architecture. So it makes sense. I mean, all the supercomputers use that kind of architecture. So intuitively, that makes sense. So we just went along and make chips for them. And of course, I think he lost money on CUDA for at least 10 years.
I think that's
but
our
only
math too.
he can sustain that kind of he has that stamina.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to all three of you. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Our honor.
Well, a huge thank you to our guests for taking us through those early years. What a wild ride from near insolvency, as they said, to defining the GPU, graphics, and gaming.
Yeah, with some Denny's along the way.
Yep.
NVIDIA's fight to survive in the graphics industry laid the foundation for everything that came next, but their biggest gamble was still ahead.
Next up, we move into the 2000s when NVIDIA took a leap beyond graphics into computing, as they're saying, more broadly. It was a bet that could have sunk the company, and frankly, a lot of industry analysts and investors thought that it would, but instead, here we are today. Thank you.
So CUDA, NVIDIA's language and developer platform, was a huge gamble. GPUs were for graphics, but nobody was using them for computing. But NVIDIA believed something that others didn't.
And this was completely counterintuitive to repurpose graphics cards for general purpose computing at the time. It started in supercomputing with academics and scientists, but it set the stage for everything from AI to modern chip design today.
Yep. And joining us to break it all down are Dr. Satoshi Matsuoka, who led the Tsubame, which was the first CUDA-powered supercomputer. Dr. Anirudh Devgan, the CEO of Cadence and a leader in chip design innovation.
And of course, Pat Gelsinger, the longtime chip industry executive, Intel executive, and recent CEO of Intel. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to
Very
have
good.
you here.
Great to be here.
Great.
Well, Pat, we thought that, sorry, Dr. Matsuoka, you built the first GPU-based supercomputer. Tell us that story. How did you get the idea? Did you think this would work? Did you envision we would be here someday?
On this stage, no. The idea first came because I was working on supercomputers for a long time, and then when of course, reading up on these magazines and tech journals, then this thing called the programmable graphics pipeline started appearing as proposals from several GPU vendors. I said, then look at the schematics and everything. It's like, this looks familiar.
And it's essentially like repurposing programmable shaders and
Yeah.
trying to use that to do broader computing tasks, right?
Well, but the reason we came to the conclusion this was reusable, it looked very familiar to the traditional vector supercomputer architecture. But it's going to be a single chip. Okay, maybe we can use it for computing non-graphic stuff. Of course, there were lots of shortcomings in the early days. But then we tried various things. It didn't quite work out because there are some limitations. Then the CUDA GPU started coming out. Had the right architecture. Instead of trying to fudge the programming into the graphics pipeline, it had this new language, CUDA, which essentially is sort of like a SIMD language, a single instruction multiple data language, and meant for parallelism. We look at the language that maybe we can program this. A lot of our traditional supercomputer algorithms, we tried that and worked superbly. So that was
were you buying GeForce consumer grade graphics cards at this point in time?
Yeah, so the first supercomputer we had built was, of course, we had some small equipment in the test lab, but the first, moderate sized machine was, by today's standards, it's tiny. It was a 128 GPU machine back in 2007, and this was sponsored by Microsoft. And the aha moment when we thought, this is going to be really usable in production is there was this supercomputer Blue Gene made by IBM and was running this this what's called protein docking code. You try to dock two proteins together, running a Blue Gene. Our team, my software team, along with the biology team, ported that over to this GPU cluster, which must have been like 1/20th to 1/50th the cost. It ran 4 times faster than Blue Gene.
Wow.
So this was the moment when we thought, this is going to be used in production, and then came Tsai afterwards.
Pat, I have a question for you. So you're at Intel at this time, and at least to me, at this moment, NVIDIA is sort of this peripheral thing. Like, they're a graphics card maker, and there's some academics that are doing cool things with it.
You let them live on your motherboard.
Barely.
What did you make of all of this, and did you think it was intriguing enough that it could become this type of market today?
Yeah, and it was a fabulous time for the CPU, right? It was the king of the hill. And remember, what's a processor, right? You're running workloads. And the workloads of the day were operating systems, databases, virtualization, getting underway. And that was where the energy was in the developer and application community. And if you wanted to build a supercomputer, you just stuck a lot of them together over some mesh, an operation. And Jensen and I had numerous conversations about throughput computing. Today we refer to it as accelerated computing versus scalar computing. Branch prediction and short latency, pipelines versus, hey, Who cares how long the pipeline is? Just maximize throughput and create the programmability. And obviously at the time, hey, the CPU was the king of the hill. But, and I applaud Jensen for his tenacity of just saying, no, I'm not trying to build one of those. I'm trying to deliver against the workload, starting in graphics, but became this broader view. And then he got lucky, right, with AI. And one time I was debating him, he says, no, I got really lucky, right, with the AI workload, because it just demanded that type of architecture. And obviously, today, that's where the center of application development is, right, around AI, around these machine learning algorithms and so on, but we're not done. Right, in that sense, and there's a lot more to be done, and I'm not sure all of those are going to land on GPUs into the future.
Because it's really the question of, is this workload parallelizable, right?
Yeah, and I mean the AI workload is insanely parallelizable.
Embarrassingly parallelizable, I think is the term.
Because you're parallelizable across arrays, right? We were building 64 and 80-bit precision floating point. Now we're talking about 4-bit precision, and could we go to unary, right? This is just nuts in comparison, right? But again, I really applaud the team at NVIDIA because, under Jensen's leadership, they really saw that vision. But today, if we think about, for instance, the training workload, okay, that got to give way to something much more optimized for inferencing. A GPU is way too expensive. I argue it's 10,000x too expensive to fully realize what we want to do with deployment of inferencing of AI. And then, of course, what's beyond that, right? And when I disagree with Jensen, I think quantum computing, we'll have it before the end of this decade in realizable form.
You think in the next 5 years we're going to have quantum computing in production?
Realizable quantum computing, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Right, and so the data center of the future, right? You're going to have some, traditional CPUs running portions of that workload, data handling, et cetera. You're going to have, training workloads. You're going to have inferencing optimized workloads, and you're going to have QPUs, quantum processing units. And if you think about quantum, most of humanity, right, most of the interesting things in humanity are quantum effects. So having a model of computing to look at those things is very appropriate, just like the GPU looked more like the brain for training and human and language and all of those things. So, I truly believe that that's the data center of the future, all three of those.
So right now we're kind of talking about this late 2000s, early 2010s era of NVIDIA's accelerated computing before we get to the Transformer paper, the explosion of AI. Could you, if you were rewinding all the way back then and you're having dinner with Jensen and you're trying to pitch him, here's all the things that are going to be hard about going from what you do today to becoming a generalizable computing platform, what does that list look like?
Well, it was very much around the programming model. Right, and we debated substantially because, they had a 10x flop performance versus most of the CPUs, so we had projects trying to, work to close the flop gap. But the reason that the GPU was an ugly machine was it was an ugly machine, right? It was not programmable. You didn't have good models for how to take advantage of that throughput. And that gap lasted a long time until CUDA got more and more functional over time. And the workloads and the developers started to align to that model of computing. And, here we are. This is stunning, what's happened. Like I say, we got really lucky, right, with this workload, but we're far from done.
Yeah. Anirudh, I'm curious in your world, when did you first come across accelerated computing and start to think, oh, this could be important for the future?
Absolutely. So what we do is we make software to design chips and electronic systems.
A lot of customers here today.
Yeah, a lot of customers. We're glad to work with all the big companies in the world. And this software is like, basically what I say is computer science plus math. It's like numerical software, mathematical software. This is not your typical software. So over like 30 years, the industry has optimized this software intensely. And so we are always looking for the best hardware to run it on. But my training, we are like software by nature. So this is always the search for what is the best computing platform. So even from the 90s, and of course it used to be CPUs, but what the whole point of, I think, NVIDIA's rise is the software drives the hardware, okay? And we're always looking for a massively parallel system because after a while, like even by the late 90s, it was clear that the CPUs are now going to scale, the power limit. So I did a lot of parallel computing in the mid, like 2005, 2006 timeframe, and we had to do it through CPUs, okay? But there's this trade-off of how complicated a CPU is and how many do you have, right? How complicating is the compute? And CPUs those days were very complicated because they were trying to do superscalar, all these things. Whereas GPU is less complicated, but there is a lot of them. And there's this trade-off, how many computing elements versus how many not. But this is all driven by the software workload. And some software workloads are very parallelizable, like matrix multiply, which is AI, and some are less parallelizable. So I started experimenting with GPUs from 2005 onwards. And they were good, but I think they got really better. So I have to credit NVIDIA by really improving the generality of GPUs.
And to Pat's point, the programming model, making it actually usable.
Also from from 2005 onwards or 2010, what we are always looking for, software people, is we want the CPU and GPU to be close to each other. See, what happens is in the beginning...
That's going to be a huge issue going forward as well, right? How you be able to share memory across those environments, what the fabric architecture looks like, what's the memory, semantics that you're going to have, right? Is it shared, is it cached, is it coherent?
And CPU has a lot of benefits, like it's a conditional thing. If something is conditional, CPUs can handle it. And AI also, when it starts off in the last few years, is very brute force. It's like a dense multiply. But that will get optimized. Even when chip design software started, it was dense matrices. Then it went to sparse matrices. Then it went to all kinds of latency partitioning, which is what is happening in AI now. So the AI workload also will become much more complex. So it will also need the CPU. So the good thing, I think, not only is the GPU, but I think what NVIDIA has done really well recently is this combination of Grace Blackwell or Grace Hopper, because you always want CPU close to you, and enough CPUs.
Right.
And then a lot of compute elements with GPUs. So this kind of CPU, GPU together is finally now a very good platform for people like us to optimize our software.
So I'm curious about that in particular, your software. You said that the workload kind of drives the architecture that makes sense, the software workload. For the software workload of chip design software, how parallelizable is the task? And how are you looking at migrating the way Cadence software runs from CPUs to GPUs, or is it just not make sense to run on GPUs?
No, we already run on a lot of software on GPUs.
Yeah.
Okay? And the work, we do have all kinds of workload. It's not one software. Some workload is very difficult to parallelize. Some workload is very easy to parallelize. See, like for example, matrix multiply is very easy to parallelize, like AI. So there is like system simulation, right? When you do like fluid dynamics or thermal simulation or weather forecasting, that's very similar to AI workload. But when you do like matrix inverse, it's very difficult to parallelize. Instead of multiply, matrix inverse. So we have like other kind of simulation, like transistor simulation. It's matrix inverse is very difficult to parallelize. But we have done those algorithms. These are proprietary algorithms from like 10 years ago to even parallelize not easy to parallelize thing. That's where the software. And I think GPUs are getting better and better to do that. But then there are other algorithms which are purely, integer-based performance, like Boolean operations, So that's but I think that's why I'm saying, one thing is the GPUs and, like especially Hopper and all have come a long way, and Blackwell. And then with Grace together, it gives a very rich platform. So we are able to, we're going to announce a lot of stuff, today and next few months on accelerating on Grace Blackwell.
Yeah.
And we can do the entire suite now with that.
Well, people are talking about ultra dense compute capability. But when you look at, we run big supercomputers. Our supercomputer has 160,000 nodes, and it's called Fugaku. And next generation will probably go with GPUs, whether it be NVIDIA or not, we don't know yet. But one thing, when we do this comprehensive analysis of the workload, as you said, when you look across these supercomputing workloads, majority of them are bandwidth bound. I'd like to stress that one of the observations that was made very early, like when building very early GPU supercomputers, I said, look very much like a traditional vector supercomputer. Well, vector supercomputers were all about bandwidth, memory bandwidth, network bandwidth.
So it's not just the compute. It's
Not
about
just the
making sure
compute. So that's why GPUs have HBM.
I've joked that the GPU is the most expensive memory controller that's ever shipped.
Right. So,
Spoken like a real CPU guy.
But it is. If anytime it's sitting there waiting for memory, right? It's basically a heat-producing memory controller waiting for it. So that balance of memory, right, bandwidth of the memory hierarchy, and how it fits to the compute elements of the GPU is super important.
in fact, 70 to 80% of the workload are bound by memory, and not by compute. So the GPU is having this vector computer-like architecture to drive the bandwidth, as well as facilitating modern memory like HBM. Really helps to accelerate the workload. And this is even true for AI, because transformers are not just about matrix multiply. Half of the time, transformers spent accessing memory because there's a fully connected layer. There's a layer that does the matrix multiply, multi-head attention. But then there's a fully connected layer, which is all bandwidth bound. So about 50% is matrix, 50% is memory.
So that's why I think some of the future, particularly inferencing optimized chips, will be much more focused around things like in-memory computing, right? Where you bring the memory and the computing elements. You have low radix math that you're doing, and that's why I think inference optimization, right? Will get a different chip architecture that will be optimized around the memory subsystem.
Is anyone shipping in-memory compute right now?
Oh, several. Some of the companies are starting to as well. None of them to me have quite matched yet the programmability across a range of workloads, but I think they're getting close. There's about half a dozen companies. I happen to invest in one of them, Fractal, right, that's working in this area, but there's a couple others like D-Matrix that are focusing. And, we need to make inferencing 10,000 times more efficient. That's going to take some pretty novel breakthroughs, and a lot of it's going to be exactly in this area of what the memory hierarchy looks like and how memory and computing come together.
So one thing I do want to mention about Jensen and NVIDIA, because people always say, like, this I watched, Jensen and NVIDIA for the last 20 years, definitely the last 10 years. And everybody says...
Some of us argued, some of us fought with them, some of us loved them.
We'll come back to that.
And we worked with them closely for 20 years now. So I think a lot of people say, GPUs are good at X, but for Y, you need something else, okay? But that X is not constant. The good thing about NVIDIA, they always innovate. They have a yearly cadence now, innovating, adding not just compute, but the architecture. So I think NVIDIA, what is remarkable, and their connection to the software ecosystem, and they work closely with us, they work closely with other kind of software company to know what is coming. So I think sometimes people make a mistake of looking at NVIDIA or GPUs in a very static way. It's not a static thing. It's a dynamic thing, and it's changing very fast.
I mean, certainly
and they adapt very well to it.
It's this incredible achievement in this era. I mean, this was a developer relationships in the first era of NVIDIA meant video game developers. And then they came to you, and then they came to industry, and then they came to all
So I think Jensen's superpower is connecting not just with the users of his products, but with the developer community and knowing what they need and moving NVIDIA forward. And this is really a great thing to see over the years. So I think to assume NVIDIA is static is a big mistake. They're the most dynamic.
He's back there planning 1-2 GTCs from now.
Exactly.
He's like barely focused on today.
So that's the real strength of their operation.
Pat, you mentioned earlier this kind of crazy phenomenon that is the graphics cards that they made were an architecture that were really, really good for graphics rendering. And then they got very lucky that at some point in the future, the transformer paper would get invented, and then they would be this unbelievably well-suited thing for the AI era. Is there another version of history where that could have been Intel, or that could have been someone else? Did it have to be NVIDIA being at the center of this universe?
Well, clearly, I had a project that was well-known in the industry called Larrabee.
Right? Exactly.
As well, which was trying to bridge the programmability of the CPU with a throughput-oriented architecture. And I think had Intel stayed on that path, the future could have been different at that point. And as I said, I give Jensen a lot of credit. He just stayed true to that throughput computing or accelerated, computing vision that, brought them to this point that the workloads said, where can I get the best result? workloads aren't these magic things in that regard. People, software algorithms are trying to solve hard problems. And what's the best hardware platform to do it on? And that takes them a couple of years to port and optimize, for it. And hey, he was true to that vision and what we have today. But there's workloads of tomorrow, and people are innovating what those look like. And as I said, I think inferencing needs a better architecture. I think that quantum will emerge as well, because hey, those algorithms don't fit on classical computers of today, and most of humanity runs on quantum effects. Right, and most of the interesting problems are quantum related, and having a quantum architecture for quantum problems, I think, will open up entirely new dimensions of computing future.
When you say most of humanity runs on quantum effects, you mean like the
well,
life is
semiconductor is a
probabilistic?
quantum effect, right? When you think about it. So you go to a quantum, most of biology benefits from quantum effects. So I'd say most of the unsolved problems, leverage quantum effects, right? And also, we're going to be operating much more at cryogenic temperatures going forward, right? So you're going to see many of those things like superconducting will come into it. You'll also be able to, open up, we're scratching the surface on composite materials, right? 2, 3, 4%, of the magnetic materials have been explored. Right, we have enormous portions of that for better magnetics. Many of the medical breakthroughs are limited by computing. And again, most of those algorithms were going to fit much better on a quantum machine, than they do on today's classical machines. That's why I say this is a thrilling time to be a technologist. Just thrilling. I just wish I was 20 years younger to be doing more of it. It is that good.
Well,
but maybe medicine will give me another 20 years.
Eat well, sleep.
Yeah.
Dr. Matsuoka, are you seeing, do you use quantum in your lab?
Well, yes. At Center, as we speak, we're bridging our supercomputer, one of the leadership supercomputers, Fugaku, with multiple quantum machines that we are partnering with a company like IBM, Quantinium, etc. And also, RIKEN has its own quantum center, developing our own quantum computer. But the future, we believe, will be hybrid. So there are certain things when quantum computers really excel at, when there are some problems when quantum computers are not really advantageous.
Quantum, right? Will be next to accelerated, next to classical.
So it really it really helps to have the best of both worlds. That is to have two collaborate, and then do stuff that what's good at, and combining the two really excels. We found really excels the ability of the future computers to solve difficult problems that Pat mentioned. So in fact, we have such several results in that already. Some of the problems that even the biggest supercomputers could not solve, we were starting to solve in this hybrid environment. So we're investing quite a bit in this quantum classical hybrid computing, and certainly for certain problems, that's going to be the answer. But that said, for a lot of other things, GPUs will also be great too.
Also quantum, of course we work with a lot of quantum companies because they design the chips, Cadence, we work with almost all of them. But I think we should be careful that, there is a lot of benefit to scale. Computing has to be done at scale. When we run our software, or when, with the AI workloads or traditional workload. So silicon has a lot of scale. So I think of course, quantum has a lot of potential for certain applications, but I would not count out silicon anytime soon.
No.
Because,
We need silicon too.
But let me pile on that. The quantum effects or the quantum solutions I'm intrigued by are all building on silicon. There have been trillions of dollars invested into silicon, right? Manufacturing, scale, understanding. Silicon is like God's gift to humanity. You can bend it, you can shape it, you can manufacture it. It's a new, 4-4, you can put things into it. So I believe the realizable million qubit machines that I believe will emerge this decade, will be based on silicon manufacturing for quantum effects and qubits.
Wow, future's exciting.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I think that takes us to the end. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Each of you obviously have, very different backgrounds, academia, cadence. I think basically software that is used by every single chip designer in the world in some way.
Including NVIDIA itself.
Including NVIDIA,
great
including the biggest companies in the world. And Pat, I just think you've seen a very interesting perch, and the world could have evolved in a lot of different ways. And I think it's really interesting. I keep going back to your comment, lucky. Lucky that it evolved in this way with NVIDIA and Jensen sort of bending the universe a little bit toward NVIDIA's GPUs.
I love the great Bell comment. The harder I work, the luckier I got, and I really believe NVIDIA created a lot of their luck, right? In that regard, and it was decades of hard, contiguous work in a singular direction that allowed them to bend the universe in their direction right now.
Well, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
A big thank you to our guests for taking us through that chapter. NVIDIA's shift to accelerated computing brought about, obviously, this huge change that we've been talking about, but really, at this era, kind of in niche corners of the academic and scientific world. The impact wasn't mainstream until AI.
Yep, and then AI obviously changed everything. GPUs have gone from accelerating specific workloads here and there to changing the way people work today across every industry.
Deep learning, large-scale AI models, automation, none of it happens without the foundation that NVIDIA built.
Yep, so let's take a look at how we got here today.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, as we step into the next chapter of our story, AI is becoming a dominant force in our world today. Few people are better positioned to help us unpack this moment than our next guests. Each of them have played a key role in shaping the industries AI is now revolutionizing.
So let's welcome Bill McDermott, the chairman and CEO of ServiceNow, leading the AI shift in enterprise software. Young Liu, the CEO of Foxconn, the world's largest technology manufacturer. And Alfred Lin, partner at early NVIDIA venture investor Sequoia Capital. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Great to
This
see you
is
guys.
this is a great group right here. This is special.
Yeah, let's let it rip.
Well, Bill, on that note, it's wonderful to see you again.
Thank
we
you.
recorded, just about 2 weeks ago at the ServiceNow office. You look loose.
I'm loose. I'm ready to roll.
On the loose.
Where do you want to take it, David?
Oh, goodness. Well, you joined ServiceNow 5 years ago now. When you joined at that moment in time, 2020, end of 2019 into 2020, how important did you think AI was going to be to ServiceNow then? And then contrast that with today.
I thought it was going to be everything. And that's why we started building LLMs with Jensen Huang right out of the gate. Because we believed that if you had a great UI and you could have business logic on the fly, which AI enables you to do, and you could control the data plane, you could literally be the AI operating system for every great enterprise around the world. And so all credit to NVIDIA for the early work that they did with us. And today, the manifestation of that dream is coming full cycle. ServiceNow is a leader, NVIDIA is a leader, and we're winning with AI. There you go.
All right, give us a little then and now, though, because this is before the ChatGPT moment. You joined 24 months before any of that.
Yeah.
So, you could come in with a notion that AI was going to be important. Was there any step change along the way where you were like, even I have to change my forecasts?
Totally. I ran another business software company prior to coming to ServiceNow, and I actually had to hire ServiceNow to straighten out the mess. You see, these large operating systems, these business software systems, they've been around nearly 6 decades. And the logic in these business systems is highly, highly structured. And so in a world where you want to search and get an immediate answer to any question, that doesn't work anymore. So AI became the objective because you have to turn these enterprises loose. You got to get them loose. They're too tight. They can't get things done. They're not agile enough. They're not fast enough. And it's killing productivity and it's killing opportunity. So I felt that ServiceNow, with great partners like NVIDIA, great partners like Dell and others, could pull it off. And we're still working on it, but we're in the lead and we're going to push, push, push.
Sound like Jensen.
Love it. Alfred, we'll go to you next. A slightly different version of the same question. You've been at Sequoia for, 15 years now, I believe, 15, 16 years. Contrast 10 years ago versus today, number of AI pitches that you are getting from startups.
Well, I think the number of AI pitches at Sequoia has just continued to increase. And my career in technology dated Sequoia, but technology just continues to have accelerating change. And it's a privilege at Sequoia to be at the forefront and see all these companies come in and tell us about what they want to do and change the future. AI has existed for a long, long period of time, going all the way back to Jensen and graphics. If you think about visualizing the world in graphics, that wasn't thought of before. And today we're talking about things that wasn't talked about then. In fact, I would say today, what we're talking about today, we will not talk about 3 months ago, because what we're talking about now, we didn't talk about 3 months ago. And so we're just in a world of accelerating change, and it's so exciting to be here and see the forefront. And everything is being built on this layer of NVIDIA chips and the ecosystem around NVIDIA. Then you have the LLMs that are building on top of it. And then you have the application layer that is building on top of that, such as ServiceNow and many of the other companies that we've backed in, recently and in the past. Every single company is going to become an AI company, whether you like it or not, or you'll be left behind.
It's really cool. We talk a lot on the show about, we sort of almost half-jokingly call it the Michael Moritz corollary to Moore's Law, which is Michael Moritz, legendary investor in Sequoia, observed, he was sort of wondering, like, how can we keep investing in these companies and have a hope, a dream, a chance of them becoming like an NVIDIA that we invested in so long ago, like a Cisco that we invested in so long ago, or a Google? How can we ever top that? Or a ServiceNow?
Yeah.
And the answer is exactly what you're saying. The markets that you can address with technology keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger as technology moves further into all of our lives. And we're just seeing this now happen, like, this used to happen on 5-10-year cycles. Now it's 3-month cycles with AI.
Well, I would add to that, because at Sequoia we have the privilege of meeting founders when they're ideating. So a set of founders and a founding team with an idea, and with that idea in the right hands, in a decade, that company can be worth $1 to $10 billion. In 2 decades, it could be worth $10 to $100 billion. And in 3 decades, it could be worth $1 trillion, like has happened with NVIDIA. And if you just compound $3 trillion from today, 15% over the next decade, we will have $10 trillion companies. And that's the reason why this is such an exciting time to be on this planet.
Can you help us maybe put some numbers to the delta in pitches now versus 10 years ago? I assume every single entrepreneur you meet with is an AI pitch in some way now when you're getting presented a new opportunity.
I think that's absolutely right, but at the same time, what's fundamental about AI companies and software companies and hardware companies are all the same. You have to build something that is stable over time. You have to build a business, and you have to solve hard problems. And I love when Jensen was on your podcast when he talked about if you solve complex problems that no one can solve and you're patient, great things will happen. And that's the history of technology, it's a history of venture capital, it's a history of NVIDIA.
Yeah. Well, Chairman Liu, it's an honor to have you here with us today. I'm curious, Foxconn has obviously grown tremendously in recent years along with NVIDIA, and NVIDIA has now become, I think most people don't know this, an enormous customer of Foxconn. You assemble all of the computing platforms that NVIDIA ships to customers. I'm curious, what has been the bigger transformation for you all? And maybe the answer is they're both of equal magnitude. Growing NVIDIA and data center as a data center end products as a business line for Foxconn, or using AI and using AI products yourself in how Foxconn operates.
First of all, thank you for having me here.
I'm the manufacturing guy, very different from the software and the investment companies. We do most of the NVIDIA systems, not 100% of it, but most of them. Okay. And we do mostly the hardware part of it. And in the manufacturing service industry, short of labor is a problem that we will have to face. As long as the prosperity of the societies become better and better, the 3D type of a work, no one would like to do it. 3D means dull, dirty, and dangerous type of work. So,
especially across, how many sites does Foxconn operate now across the world, and how many countries?
About 24 countries.
A massive global footprint.
Yeah, with about 240 factories around the world.
Wow.
Yeah, at its high, we employ altogether a little more than 1 million people. Yeah, so we have to manage that.
And so how, in a physical manufacturing environment like yours, how does AI play a role?
Okay, AI, I think AI that you're talking about is not just the generative AI. Maybe 5-10 years ago, it was discriminative AI. With that, we use that to do defect analysis, to identify objects.
Yeah.
But it's only limited use. But with generative AI, we're able to build the experience from the existing technicians and free the technician their time to do something more important. Okay, that's because of a generative AI. With that, we see more and more work can be done much more efficiently in the factories.
Yep.
Like for now, we have automation level-wise, we're about 60 to 80%.
Wow.
Of the automation
amazing.
level. Yes.
Wow.
But how do we make that automation perform better? We need something like generative AI to do it. Discriminative AI cannot do it. So
when you're manufacturing NVIDIA systems, do they sort of insist, can you use AI more than you would with other customers? Can we push the envelope a little bit in our process for how we make these DGX machines?
Yeah, I think NVIDIA, their system is most advanced. We need that most advanced AI systems to
These are enormous physical objects that you're creating for them.
Yeah, enormous. We're talking about racks.
Yeah.
Instead of servers. We're talking about number of servers putting together in a rack. In the future, we'll be talking about container data center modules. Okay.
Wow.
So it's huge comparing to phones. Much bigger.
Yes, you make a lot of phones.
I think definitely.
The world knows you as a phone manufacturer, but there is this crazy thing that I think people don't really read into when they're seeing, NVIDIA's data center revenue going like this. All those machines rolling off the line and getting shipped to customers, which are invisible to all of us, are manufactured at Foxconn. Very physically put together, huge volumes of physical material that run these customer workloads.
You're right. That's why we're so busy. Even in the Chinese New Year's, we had so many people who had to do overtime trying to meet the demands.
Right.
And the demands is getting higher and higher.
I love it. Well, Bill, maybe this is a good transition back to you. We heard about how AI and generative AI is helping transform Foxconn.
Right.
You are at the forefront of all of your customers. Everybody who ServiceNow is enabling to succeed. What are they using AI for? What are you seeing out there?
The number one concept we wanted to bring to the world was an AI platform for business transformation, where you would have one platform that went to every corner of your office, whether you were revolutionizing solving hard problems for IT people, for employees in general, serving customers better, or engineers, where you do all the hard setup work so they can do the intellectually important work. So that one system is the only system that has the agility to go to every corner of the office, integrate with all the LLMs that are already out there, and just think about a UI abstraction layer like a ChatGPT, if you will. Then run your business processes differently, so you can't afford to have business logic that is completely configured to 60-year-old databases that are not agile enough for an AI world, and then
or might be siloed to just your sales department or
break
just your IT
down
department.
the silos, because people work in teams across silos, and then unleash the data. And the data could be video, it could be voice, and obviously it could be streaming, or it could be simply something that is unstructured on somebody's computer. How do we get that into an automated workflow so you can take action on it to get stuff done? And that's the problem that also has a $20 trillion addressable market in the next 5 years. And for every $1 of smart AI investment, you'll get 5 in return. Also, right now, you hear efficiency, effectiveness, cost takeout. You got a $4 trillion OpEx takeout in the next 5 years. So what platform is going to connect to all this innovation? And we built the foundation on NVIDIA and that GPU stack of NVIDIA because we knew that was the most substantial one in the world. But also, I do want to give a shout out to Jensen. I mean, the guy's a masterpiece, and the ecosystem that he has created speaks for itself. And I'm here to, in large measure today, to celebrate him and what we've done. You know, we're reinventing banking. You think about banking today, wow, why do you even need so much of the infrastructure in a bank when you can deal with a consumer where they are in any channel and meet them where they are? Think about healthcare. Why is it that we don't understand the tonality of a patient calling in and connect it to all their records and files so we know the urgency of a case just based on the tone of someone's voice? All this stuff and more on the shop floor, making the manufacturing professional more productive with AI, but at the same time making the engineer more dynamic so they're not doing setup work, they're actually thinking and changing processes. And think about tariffs. I mean, tariffs, we have to change supply chains now in milliseconds.
We got pretty far in here without bringing up tariffs.
You with me?
Yes.
So, but now you're going to have to reorient a supply chain in real time and source from supply networks that are efficient so you can manage through some of the policy issues in the global economy. So in other words, how can every employee go to one place, get an answer to any question in real time, and do their job? Whether you're serving a customer, doing your best work, building your best idea, etc.
Yeah.
That is where we're at.
That sounds like a great software platform right there.
Totally.
Alfred, I'm curious, we're talking about use cases of AI. I think there were 2 years ago, if we were having this conversation, there'd be a lot of discussion of, wow, NVIDIA's stock price has run up. And then 1 year ago, we were having this conversation, it would be, wow, NVIDIA's data center revenue is really material. And like, that's also a very profitable business. This year, we're really having the conversation of, wow, NVIDIA's customers are actually getting incredible lift out of deploying AI in their businesses. And I'm curious for the companies that you're working with, where are you seeing either the biggest revenue improvements or cost reductions where you can actually say, oh, this business had a pre-AI world and a post-AI world, and we're seeing enormous financial outcomes from using AI?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. It goes back to what Bill was talking about. I think when you went back 2 or 3 years ago, it was still the sort of elements of coming out of research where search and summarization was like magical.
Yeah.
And you use that search and summarization to sort of effect change, especially with efficiency and effectiveness. And now we're seeing companies that are building other applications that we have not thought of before. So Bill's point is you're taking this cost out. Where's that money going? That's what's going back into more innovation, which is why it's so exciting. So new pieces of software making doctors be able to spend more time with patients and not take notes, well, that's efficiency. But magically filing the insurance claim so it doesn't get rejected, that's also efficiency. But it actually gives dollars to the hospital and dollars back to the patient.
Yep.
And so you're seeing these magical experiences come out. One of the companies we work with is Athelis that merged with Chimera that does a lot of the sort of back-end stuff. We're seeing Harvey revolutionize the way law is being practiced. We're seeing Clay revolutionize ways the sales leads are being updated magically on a day-to-day basis with new information so that the salesperson can focus on sales and making relationships and connections. I'm really excited because I think that right now we're talking about sort of a world where hardware, software, and the physical world are all merging into one, powered by AI. And we have NVIDIA and Jensen to thank for that.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to end and thank this incredible panel. Thank you, all of us. Bill, Chairman Lou, Alfred, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
That was an incredible blast of a panel.
Yep, for sure. Reflecting all the way back over the last couple hours, this is kind of insane that it's the same fundamental building blocks, the hardware, the parallel computing as a paradigm that first transformed graphics 20 plus years ago, then accelerated computing, and has now taken AI from the realm of science fiction to the reality all around us every day in our daily work.
Absolutely. As mentioned earlier, SAP Center is home to the San Jose Sharks of the NHL, who just 3 days ago played a game in this very building. It's been truly remarkable to watch the army of folks transform this arena into the state-of-the-art tech mecca that it is today.
As soon as last year's GTC wrapped up, the NVIDIA team started work on this year's event. And as soon as the lights go off at SAP Center today, they'll start working on GTC 26.
Yes, they will. Thank you to everyone who made this pre-show happen and to those who've worked tirelessly to bring GTC to life.
We've been thrilled to have been a part of the show, and just like you, cannot wait for today's keynote.
But before we go to that, we have more to discuss.
For the final act of our pregame show, we are bringing in two of the very best people in the world to discuss what the future holds thanks to the AI revolution.
Yep. AI went from an academic experiment to powering everything from enterprise computing to finance, robotics, and beyond. And really, it isn't overstating it to say that NVIDIA was at the center of this transformation.
It may even be still underselling NVIDIA's role, since that sounds kind of passive when you say it that way. NVIDIA was inventing the technology and betting the company to will the AI world that we have today into existence.
Yep. And joining us now to dive into this shift are Gavin Baker, the investor who I think before anybody else really saw the promise of AI for NVIDIA, and Michael Dell, CEO of Dell, who has worked alongside NVIDIA as a close partner for decades, from motherboards to data centers. And Michael, we thought as a fun way to start here, we were talking to Jensen in preparation for
we hope
conversation.
This is okay.
We hope this is okay. We haven't previewed this with you. Sure. He said he's still a little mad at you.
Apparently you approached him, well, there was some conversation that got started right when he wanted to distribute his graphics cards in your computers, talking mid-90s.
Yep.
And you were looking at him saying, this is like 3 times too expensive. Graphics cards don't contribute that much value to the end user consumer experience. We're going to have to either not go with you, or you're going to have to basically have no margin on this product.
And
do you recall a conversation like that?
You always got to drive a hard bargain, you know. But what I remember is, you know, there was kind of a pivotal moment where, in the open ecosystem, we could create a workstation that was just beating the pants off of Sun and Apollo at the time. And, you know, it was like 1/3 the cost, and we were able to get, you know, all the key applications. And then in 1997, you know, NVIDIA showed up with this Riva 128, and
we've got one right here.
Right.
This is a monster of a graphics card. Look at this thing.
I don't remember the heatsink being that big in our machine.
We dug this out of the NVIDIA museum.
We've got to put this down here for everyone to look at it.
Yeah, and so what, you know, that brought the costs way down. So then I think we were able to do some business, you know, in a big way. And it took it into the mainstream. And, you know, we were able to deliver it to, you know, enterprise customers, commercial customers, end users, doing gaming, and it kind of kicked off this revolution of 3D computing in an affordable way. And of course, you know, we were growing 100%, you know, a year, you know, in the 90s. That was a lot of fun. And,
I bet.
You know, NVIDIA was right there with us at the beginning.
Great.
Super fun. I mean, you really, like, it's kind of incredible. Dell has been there with NVIDIA from selling those things in Alienware PCs to gaming customers, up through scientific computing, entering general purpose GPU workloads, and then into the data center. When Jensen called you, I assume he called you at some point and said, Michael, we're going into the data center. What did you think?
So we started the server business in the mid-90s, and you started to see high performance computing, accelerated computing, and the GPUs like the kind that were in the the Riva 128 turned out they were great for deep learning and machine learning. And so you had all these
Which was kind of an accident of history, right? It was people kind of taking the programmable shaders and using those to kind of hack their way to making supercomputers out of graphics cards.
Exactly, triangles. And so you took all that power, and you had all these computer scientists figuring out clever ways of using that power in an accelerated way. And yeah, we were providing all those, and as it grew, we expanded our partnership and relationship, and we continued to work on the all the things related to the PC. And then of course you had these incredible breakthroughs in the models, the algorithms, and here we are today. And last year we delivered roughly $10 billion of accelerated AI servers, more than anybody.
It's the fastest growing segment of your business, right? It's
the fastest growing segment, and the part that is growing the fastest within the fastest growing part is the enterprise. So we delivered 2,200, more than 2,200 Dell AI factories to enterprise customers, and it's also governments and startups and medium-sized businesses. Certainly, the service providers and the hyperscalers, and I think we're just at the beginning of this. I still think we're in the first single-digit percentages of the S-curve adoption of this technology, across our customers.
Because I think most people who are watching this at home or perhaps in the arena right now don't realize exactly what Dell's role is in this world. I mean, you see NVIDIA's financial results, and you see, wow, they're doing great in the enterprise, and wow, they're selling a lot of DGXs, and that server business must be doing great. But we just spoke with the CEO of Foxconn. It's not like it rolls out of Foxconn, and I'm like, oh, great, I'll just take that and I'll rack that myself in my own data center. They kind of need to call Dell or someone like Dell in order to actually
very
deploy.
few customers do that. So when you get into the commercial and enterprise customers, yes, they want accelerated servers, but they also want storage, and we're the leader in data storage, larger than the next 3 competitors combined. And there's a bunch of services that go around, the installation and deployment of these. And we've been expert at that, and so you put all that together. We've been able to continue to grow the business. Our infrastructure business last year grew at 29% to about $45 billion, something like that.
It's a big business to grow that fast.
It'll keep growing substantially this year as well.
I think it's just the most amazing story that Dell and NVIDIA, this company that you started in your college dorm room to sell PCs to end customers.
And a peripheral graphics card
And NVIDIA
maker.
started to make this for gamers, and here you are selling $45 billion worth of AI equipment to data centers and enterprises last year. It's just incredible.
And this year our revenues will be $105 billion or something like that total. So, for these enterprise customers, they really prefer a one-stop solution for everything. So we can deliver from the desktop to the notebook, the workstation, the data center, cloud, financing services, everything.
Right. Your segments kind of grow together, because if somebody's coming to you for an AI factory, they're probably also buying PCs from you too.
Well, we make it easy for them because it all works together, and they don't have to go piece it together with 20 different companies, and they like that. And it works well, it's reliable, we got a great supply chain. They know they can count on us to deliver.
Makes sense.
Well, Gavin, we want to turn it to you now and your story with NVIDIA. Do you remember, can you tell us the context of when you bought your first share of NVIDIA on the public markets?
Sure. I don't know if I remember the exact moment, but I was a very young analyst at Fidelity. In January of the year 2000, I was assigned coverage of small and mid-cap semiconductors. NVIDIA was a relatively new company. It was small.
Less than $1 billion market cap?
Probably right around there.
Yeah.
I had never met anyone like Jensen, and I feel very lucky that as a young man, I met him and kind of a template for what an exceptional CEO looks like. But it was probably first half of the year 2000. The Riva 128, I think, was maybe 18 months in the past. They were very excited about the Xbox partnership. And it was going to be a really big branding event that on...
that was like a $500 million revenue deal that they got.
It was a giant deal for them. It really de-risked the business. And it was a big deal for them at the time from a branding perspective that on the box that the Xbox came in, there was going to be a big NVIDIA sticker. This was going to really brand
Take
them.
Take that Intel inside.
Yeah,
we got the Xbox.
That's right, yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
But it was... It was an incredible stock. I think the NASDAQ went down something like 80 or 85%, and NVIDIA on the strength of, really decimating the other, 3D graphics, they used to call them graphics cards. NVIDIA invented the term GPU, but Voodoo and 3DFX, they were kind of the big gorilla, and NVIDIA put them out of business, kind of bought their IP, took over their 100 best engineers. So they're taking a lot of share, had a couple of great product cycles, and then you had this kind of Xbox kind of turbocharging all of it, and it was incredible.
Wow. So that was the early 2000s. Over time, I believe you and Fidelity became NVIDIA's largest shareholder. How did you build the conviction and the case that you're not going to make this becoming their largest shareholder on the strength of an Xbox thesis?
Yeah, no, and there were a lot of people involved in that. I think my friend Steve Weimer is actually technically the largest shareholder. Who's a great investor. But
that he is.
I listened to some of the earlier segments, and people talked about CUDA being 2007, and that was a big deal. But to me, it used to be called GPUs.
That's right.
General purpose GPU compute. And what really, I think, put that on the map, I don't know if anyone's talked about it in this segment, was Windows Direct Compute in 2009. And other than deep learning, I think that was the most excited I've ever seen Jensen, at least to investors. Because, at the time, NVIDIA was a relatively small company. Windows was this, giant platform, giant force. And here they were endorsing using the GPU for things other than graphics and making it easy. So being used for, fluid simulations, all sorts of science, Blue Gene. And then that really paved the way for what NVIDIA was able to accomplish with deep learning. And to me, the most important moment, and something that I think is really underrated in the history of NVIDIA and how we came to be here. And there would be no AI revolution without NVIDIA and Jensen, was he had put something called tensor cores on the Volta data center GPU, the V100.
That's like the 2016 era data center
And then towards
GPU?
the end, they had this Titan V card, which was kind of like somewhere between a very high-end consumer GPU and workstation GPU that had these tensor cores. And tensor cores were highly optimized, basically for matrix multiplication, for manipulating tensors, doing all the things you do in deep learning. But then the true kind of bet the company, burn the ships moment was putting tensor cores in the Turings, the 2080s, the consumer GPUs. And this was a giant bet because these tensor cores, at the time, they introduced something called DLSS, which uses AI to make graphics better. But the first generation of DLSS was not nearly as good as what it is today. And if their competitor had had their act together at the time, they were dedicating a lot of real estate on the chip to something other than graphics. It was an incredibly risky decision for the company to bet what was by then their biggest business, to almost disadvantage their biggest business in consumer GPUs, to make it easier for developers anywhere who could buy one of these lower priced consumer GPUs to use the Tensor cores, do AI. And I mean, it was true burn the ships moment.
I don't think that's widely understood that was a bet the company move, because they were saying, we're going to take some of this power, this real estate on this chip, and we're going to actually deprioritize a thing that we're neck to neck with competitors on, because we're starting to put our energy in this other direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an incredible leadership moment, strategic vision, and it's a risky and bold decision, that led to all of this.
It's crazy. Well, real quick, a quick break to say, if you are watching us in the SAP Center right now, please make your way to your seats. The keynote is starting very soon, and you don't want to miss Jensen's opening remarks. So make your way to your seats, and thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's the right transition to, maybe Michael, for you. Jensen, this man who today has attracted all of us here, this incredible venue, everything that's happening.
Originally a small vendor to your PC business.
Yeah. How have you watched him grow?
Yeah, no, look, I think as Gavin said, he's made a bunch of bold, incredibly insightful decisions, and saw the importance of this much earlier than anybody else, bet big on it, and has led with incredible, relentless precision in execution, and never relenting on high aspirations, and it's something to behold. I mean, it's incredible what's happening in our world today as we sort of transition from 60 years of calculating and computing to now machines that are helping us think and thinking for us.
Yeah.
And NVIDIA has been the foundation of all that, and incredibly excited to see sort of where that leads all of us in terms of the capabilities that we have. We think Gavin and I were talking about the capabilities that each of us individually have just in using these models.
Oh, it's amazing.
In our daily life. You multiply that by billions of people having access to these tools. It's just an incredible speed up moment, I think, for the world.
I have yet to ask a large public CEO this question. How has it changed your personal workflow? Like what AI's tools do you use, and for what tasks?
I would say I use all of them, and
I don't need names of any.
Voraciously.
You don't have to use
what Michael Dell workloads are being taken over by AI?
It's kind of one of my favorite analysts, because I'll get an answer back in 7 to 10 minutes on a super complicated question.
Yep.
And so often I'll open multiple tabs and talk to many different models at the same time.
Yeah.
And certainly inside our business, and our customers are aggressively adopting these tools to be able to grow faster and to be able to innovate faster and to make our companies more productive and more efficient, and sort of reimagine everything we do given all this power. And yeah, I think that's all companies want to do that. They need a lot of help, by the way, in doing that. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think we'll all be in a very different place in a few years, and the companies that are aggressive in understanding how this can reshape, the work that's been done in the past will be best positioned.
Yeah. Gavin, same question to you. What has changed in your workflow?
So I'd just say I use Grok 3, I would say, several hours a day now. And just very specifically, I was trying to remember, I was reflecting on all of the hard things that Jensen and NVIDIA went through to get here. And I was remembering, a friend of mine used to say that Jensen was he tried to storm the Intel castle for years. And he tried
he banged on every door on that castle.
He tried to storm the Qualcomm castle. And I was trying to remember coming out of the financial crisis, NVIDIA had a product called the Ion chipset. And for a while, it was by far their fastest growing product. It went into laptops. It had really good graphics. It made the PC a lot better. But it was really taking a lot of the PC bomb away from Intel. So I was trying to remember, what did Intel do that essentially just switched that business off? And Grok, on the way driving here, Grok found it for me. In 2012, Intel said we're not going to certify Ion chipsets on Intel motherboards. And that essentially killed what was this great business. That was incredible. And the great thing now is, having tried to storm these castles, now Jensen has his own castle. And it's a much better and bigger castle than the Intel or Qualcomm castles ever were.
That's an interesting, maybe can you quantify NVIDIA's moat versus the moats of old, of sort of the platform owners of old?
Well, it is. The funny thing is, I was reflecting, a lot of great CEOs, they remind me of Michael Jordan. This is quoting another friend of mine, Antonio. Michael Jordan, you could see him in his heyday. He would say to the opponent defending him, I'm going to go left, and then I'm going to dunk on you.
And it didn't matter.
And Jensen has laid out his strategy.
Yeah.
He's told everyone, I'm going left, and I'm going to dunk. First, it was CUDA. And then it was networking with the Mellanox acquisition, which was incredible. And then it was assembling all of that into a system. And then, maybe 2 years ago, he said, like my unit of competition, it's not GPUs anymore. It's not GPUs plus networking. It's not even, chips plus software. It's not even systems. It's the whole data center.
The data center is the computer.
Yeah, and integrating all of that is really, really hard to do. And the world, I think, up until 3 years ago, was very cost focused. If you were a hyperscaler, you cared about cost. And Jensen came in with a Ferrari at a moment where performance was all that mattered. And because, the Ferrari was so fast, it was actually, he had this phrase, the more you spend, the more you save.
That's all we're familiar.
We're playing bingo today to try to see if he says it a bunch.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure he will. Yeah. But it's a powerful moat.
Yeah.
It is. It's funny. When we first started doing our NVIDIA series a few years ago, we thought, NVIDIA is a chip company. It's a semiconductor company. And we still get calls from people that want to talk about are their chips really that far ahead of Google's? Or, what about all the other hyperscalers making their own chips? And to the point, that's not the moat. It's not the chips. It's the system.
Absolutely. And the software. It is just very funny. The one reason NVIDIA was so good at GPUs was I'm a big gamer. And 15 years ago, it was really hard to update your drivers. And NVIDIA got in a rhythm of updating their drivers very frequently. Yep. And if you bought an NVIDIA GPU, the great thing as a gamer was it got faster. And they're always optimizing the engines and then the games on top of the engines. And they took that same muscle to AI, where they optimized the frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch, and those are like the game engines.
Yep.
And then the algorithms are like the games. So this was a muscle that they had honed for nearly 20 years, and they were world-class at. And then they applied that to AI, and it's one reason it's been so hard to compete with them.
Well, thank you both. We've got a keynote to get to. Really appreciate your time here today. Really special.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Very special to have both of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, it was an honor.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Great job.
Thank you.
Listeners, a big thank you to Michael Dell, to Gavin Baker, for bringing our morning to a fantastic close. I feel personally lucky to sit with these guys since they've had a front row seat and participated in the entire story dating all the way back to the early days. So cool.
Totally. Thank you so much. And across all of our chapters that we've covered today in NVIDIA's journey, from the early days in graphics cards, as we've seen, to accelerated computing, and now the AI-driven world that we're living in. It's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, this morning, where are we? We're at 9:50 a.m. has already been a wild ride, and we're just getting started with the keynote coming up here.
Yeah.
Okay, what was your moment of the morning?
Ooh, honestly, my moment of the morning is just...
And are we allowed to say Jensen swinging by unexpectedly with Denny's?
That's my
There's
number
still
two.
syrup on my desk.
I know. That was not scripted, ladies and gentlemen.
I gotta clean out this suit afterwards.
we need to go do a quick cleanup before the keynote. Besides that was the moment of the morning. But I think the the tenor of the morning is just like these incredible set of people who are all here for NVIDIA, for Jensen, that they have grown their companies together, whether it's Foxconn, whether it's Dell, whether it's Sequoia Capital.
I heard Pat Gelsinger say that Jensen got lucky with AI.
Maybe it was luck, maybe it was skill, maybe it was just Jensen.
It's all of both.
You
can't build one of the largest companies in the world without it being all of both every time.
Yep. What an incredible story.
Seriously. Well, if you're watching this and you felt like, wait, I just tuned in the last 5 minutes, what did I miss? Or maybe you're in the arena and you thought, those last 90 minutes, you went through that very quickly. You are in luck. David and I host the Acquired podcast, and we did 4 full episodes on NVIDIA's history. Collectively, they're about 9 hours long, culminating with a landmark interview with Jensen on essentially how the whole company came to be in the first place. Just search Acquired in any podcast player of your choice.
Yep. And of course, all of this that we've been doing here has been leading up to the main event today, Jensen Huang's keynote. So stay tuned. It's coming up next. Thank you all for joining us here at Live at GTC with Acquired. We are so excited for the keynote, and we'll see you in there.
We'll see you in there. That was great.